Welcome to Dynamics Corner. This is Chris.
And this is Brad. This episode was recorded on February 7th, 2023. Chris.
Hey.
Here we are again with another episode of In the Dynamics Corner chair. You know, Chris, I'm asked a question quite often. And you know what that question is?
What is it? What's that question, Brad?
What is a KPI? Do you know what a KPI is, Chris?
I do know what a KPI is, but I don't know
what a KPI is.
I just don't know
because
the different kinds.
Yes. It's like, different flavors of, food. But today we had the opportunity to speak with two experts in the reporting. With us today, we had the opportunity to speak with Anthony Bonaduce and Brian Peters of Cosmos Data Technologies to talk to them about what is a KPI.
Sounds
what
good.
Is it used for?
Let's get to it.
Let's get it. Anthony, Brian, welcome back. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us again. Appreciate seeing you both. Haven't seen you both since the new year. It's a little bit late, but Happy New Year. Hope all's going well. Hope you had a pleasant holiday. Anthony, I like the new microphone.
I mean, check this thing out. It's got like 15 settings. I told you I was on another podcast recently. The gentleman was... What's happening?
I was just teasing you. Go ahead. You can talk about it.
God.
I was just kidding.
You never see. I was on this other podcast and it was so smooth and professional. And I got on with you guys and I just have no idea what's coming. It's like exciting at the same time. But yeah, they have the other gentleman. He was like, "Look, I've been doing a lot of podcasts. I've got the setup. You got to get this mic. You got to get all these things." So I talked to Brian. I'm like, maybe not going to get all of it, but I think we should maybe get some of it. Fortunately, the idea was we would maybe use the mic at different times. So Brian's using his normal setup, but I've got the fancy pod.
That's good. You sound wonderful. And then when Brian does another podcast, you'll just send him the microphone?
Exactly. Just swing by, pick it up, on the way to pick up the kids from school, Brian. Just come right
I know Anthony's car's there, but he's not answering the door for some reason.
Do you live close by to each other?
Yeah. We're pretty close. It's like 15 minutes, something like that.
Yeah.
So
That's not too bad.
Yeah.
That's not too bad.
No, as I had mentioned, I hear a lot in the world of reporting and analytics, and I had some questions on some of the things that I've heard, and I figured, who else to talk to besides two of my favorite Business Central or data analytics people in the community? I'll just start off with a blanket question. Everybody talks about this. I see it in demonstrations. I see it in literature. I see it everywhere. And I'm going to have to ask you, what the hell is a KPI?
That's a great question. We've been working on figuring that out as well. But what we've been, in all seriousness, a KPI is actually pretty interesting. And I'll share my thoughts, Brian, give yours as well. But it's funny, right? Because KPIs have sort of become this whitewashed term that, everyone just uses for everything, right? It just means a million different things. But at the end of the day, the simplest way to put it is there's this kind of mix up right now in the market, and it gets worse and worse, where people assume that any sort of metric is a KPI. And if you think about what a KPI stands for, it's a key performance indicator, right? And there's a big piece right at the start of that sort of tells you that's not correct, right? Because the key word is key, right? So the simplest way to put it is that all KPIs are metrics, but not all metrics are KPIs. Because
whoa, you just blew my mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's like there's other things like that too in our world that mess me up, right? But I mean, yeah, that's the reality of it. It's a KPI is a metric. Not all metrics are KPIs, because you have to determine what's key to your business, and it might not be the same this month as next month, so on and so forth, right? It might change over time, but that's the high level misconception I want to clear up around them. So it's a metric, but it's the most important ones.
Yeah, it's. I hear that word and I say, it's like, well, I have this KPI. What type of KPIs do you have? And it's just, well, what do you mean? So this is where I'm coming with that. So KPI is a metric. Not all metrics are KPIs. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, how does one determine what KPI they need to look at? and how can a KPI help someone, better manage their business?
Yeah, it's a good question. Brian, you want to take this one since I've been.
Yep. Yeah, and so one of the things around that is, I mean, it's gonna vary. It's gonna vary company to company, and most importantly, it's gonna vary industry to industry. I mean, you have a lot of different industries that have very specific KPIs. I mean, you see a lot of kind of ones that are kind of publicly tracked. You'll see, like for example, with airlines, the number of like on-time flights that they have, either leaving or coming from the airports, because that's something that they get tracked on. That's something that's very public, and that could have a big revenue impact for them as well, right? All of a sudden, I mean, look what happened with Southwest recently, where thousands of cancellations and all of those things, right? But for certain airlines that get a reputation for not really being on time, people are going to take their dollars elsewhere, right?
Okay.
And so being able to go in, have these airlines, for example, track when the flights are arriving, when they're leaving, and then there's some buffer that's pre-agreed upon that basically says, was it on time? If it leaves 5 minutes late, is that on time? I don't know what the specific ones are for a lot of these airlines, right? But past, what's the threshold where all of a sudden it dips into another bucket essentially. But one of the important things is I've worked with a lot of customers over the years, and they've come to me, and they may be in a very specific niche market that I don't have nearly the familiarity with that they may have, but they'll say, so what KPI should we be tracking, right? And so a lot of times I won't be able to rattle off exactly what might be most beneficial to them, but I can help guide them in the right direction based on their industry or the things that are really going to drive the leverage to their business.
That's one of the questions, as I stated. I hear a lot of people talk about, well, what type of KPIs can you tell us that, or what type of KPIs do you have available, or can you provide for us? So you work with customers and data and reporting on their data. So you have some experience, I think, with KPIs across different businesses. And are there standard KPIs that people could use? So is there, maybe the question that people ask, it might be a learning experience. It's not only, can you tell me what KPIs should be used to run my business, but also what KPIs do you have available? But are there some sort of standard KPIs from the financial aspect that are important to businesses that they should look at?
Isn't it more common though for sales? I mean, sales seems to be what's used a lot for KPIs.
So that's actually really interesting, because I think the reality is that doesn't matter the business you're in, the role you're in, there's going to be KPIs for every single one of those buckets, right? Sales, you might care about looking at new inbound leads or your average sales value, right? Your average sales price, right? You might care about sales volume by location, but then you might be a services business and you might care about utilization and billable out, number of billable hours, and profitable hours, profit by hour, things like that, right? I mean, there's a million different ways you can look at it. But the other thing, to Brian's point is, and sort of to Brad's point, I mean, there are of course generic KPIs for different industries, for different businesses and different groups, but that doesn't mean that the same KPIs for those groups will be important. And if you use Brian's airline example, right? Maybe the airline doesn't struggle with on time. Maybe they're just awesome at that. So maybe something else they're worried about is, our planes are on time, but we can't fill them up. So how do we look at, number of booked seats per plane, and how do we drive those numbers up? And it's interesting because that might be the KPI, percent of the plane that's full or whatever every time a flight goes out. But you can use metrics to support those KPIs. So you might be looking at, based on pricing strategies, how many tickets do we sell? But then what's the profitability at those prices? Is there levers we should be worrying about? Is it better if the plane goes out, slightly less full, but we sold, tickets at a higher price and we had a higher profit per customer, things like that. So no, there's definitely standardized KPIs across industries, but it's going to vary from business to business. That's what's really important for people to understand. You can't just go to a vendor like us and say, what KPIs do we need? Because my question is going to be like, tell me about your business, right? Well,
yes, I see that now.
Yeah. So what's going wrong? What do you feel like you could improve on? What should we focus on? And you want to be really narrow. You don't want to have 20 KPIs. You should have, some research will say you should have one. Others will say you should have 3 to 5. Others say 5 to 7. But the more you have, the less clear your objectives are for your business. It's harder for everyone to be on the same page.
So it sounds to me like the KPIs in this aspect is individual to a business, because if somebody wants to look at a KPI and do a comparison or a comparative KPI, if somebody else is not reporting it the same way, as you talked about, you could have the metrics to support the KPI. You may not be comparing the same information.
Yeah, and it may
Right.
not be valuable, right? It just might not be important to this business. They may have, they're performing great in this area, so they want to tune up a different area of the business, and their goal for this quarter or this calendar year or whatever is to increase sales by 10%, right? That just might be their main goal, and they're going to support it with these 2 KPIs, and then there's some metrics that support those KPIs. So it's really just about looking business to business, what's important to their specific objectives. And again, they should change, fairly often, right? You might accomplish your goal and realize there's a better way you guys could do it, or something else you should be measuring.
Okay, so somebody should determine this. It goes into, so KPI is a key performance indicator that has that's a metric, but not all metrics are KPIs. Mm-hmm. KPIs are individualistic to a particular business, and the question of what KPIs can you give me, to me sounds it's generic, or somebody who may not understand what they need more versus more of a question of tell me how I should analyze my business. If somebody is asking that question, is that a fair statement in your opinion, or?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's, in summary, it's totally fair to say there's a standard bucket of KPIs that are going to appear in most industries. Then it's determining, but for your business specifically, which of these are most important? What are your goals, right? You might want to, one business might be looking at revenue or sales or something along those lines. Their goals might be market penetration. They don't really care about average price per customer or profit per customer. They just want to take over the market. Someone else might say, we're an enterprise company and we go after enterprise, or we're a company that goes after enterprise companies. So we just want maximum sales value for each of these transactions. We may only do 24 a year, but they're $1 million plus each, and that's perfect for us. Well, so they're going to measure differently than the company that says, well, we're geared after the SMB space and we want 1,000 transactions this year, but we might only make $100 per transaction. That's fine with us.
So can I also infer that it's important that when you want to take a look at these KPIs, it's important to structure your data properly to allow you to report upon that information? So if you're talking about, is market size or, sales revenue, it's a matter of structuring your data to a point where you can report on those metrics for the data that you have set up. Now, you work with a lot of customers, doing reporting on the Business Central database. What have you found is helpful of going through sort of an exercise to determining, possibly how they could structure the data to get the most out of it if they want to look at it from different angles?
Yeah, that's a good question. Brian, I want you to talk to that piece since you deal with a lot of the data for our customers.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in to chat about that. So, I mean, what we found, over the years is that, Business Central holds a tremendous amount of information, right? A ton of information about the business is stored in there. But historically, a lot of people, they might not know exactly where it is. They might have trouble getting it out, and oftentimes they'll have trouble doing that in a repeatable fashion. And that's what we've helped with people over the years with doing. So, but a lot of it, I mean, we were on a call earlier today, and one of the topics that came up was a KPI that they're really interested in, which was around inventory turns or inventory turnover, right? So they had struggled to get some of that data out. They had mentioned that some of the, out of the box reports that came with the system that they're using didn't quite fit the bill. But what they were looking for was more detail or more insight into, inventory turns by item, by, item category, things like that. Because at the end of the day, they're a very inventory intensive organization, and they're trying to make better decisions on, are we overstocked on these products? We buy 5,000 of a certain item and then find out that it's going to take 9 months to sell through all of that. Well, That's, liability sitting on the books. That's inventory taking up space in a warehouse, things like that. So being able to look at and analyze the numbers for all of their inventory transactions is really important to them. Does that help to answer your question a little bit, Brad?
No, I think so. I think so. I'm trying to. I know you guys have a wonderful product offering for allowing businesses to report from Business Central, and you work with them to come up with the reporting. I'll use the report, but the report can cover a number of different aspects. Just to generalize it, just like we're going to generalize the word KPI. Now, within the solution that you have, do you have pre-built KPIs that somebody could modify as well? And if you have a set of pre-built, can you give me an example of like maybe some offerings that you have within that and how they can be used?
Yeah. So, one of the things we do, we have some, when you're talking KPIs, oftentimes in this day and age, right, we like those on a dashboard. They don't have to be, but people like them on a dashboard. And so one of the things we have is a two-way integration with Power BI that allows us to feed, Cosmos data into Power BI. So it just becomes a drag and drop exercise, and then take those Power BI dashboards and put them up into what's called our Cosmos portal, which is, where you access your reports, your dashboards, all that good stuff. So they're all in the same place. And so we have some kind of out of the box Power BI templates and dashboards that have different metrics around sales and inventory and finance and things like that we work with customers on. But, I think the real strength of kind of what we do around KPIs is that we give people the flexibility to determine what those are and to build them quickly. So we might give them data that says, here's all our sales data, if we use that example, right? And you've got every combination of sort of metrics you could want, right? We got sales by salesperson, sales by region, sales by state, sales by item category, by product group, whatever it is, right? And they can just, in Power BI, the beauty of it is if that data is ready to go, like it is with Cosmos, they can just drag in the metrics they want to see for their KPIs. So they could just drag in sales by quarter, right? Because that's what they want to focus on for this upcoming quarter. They can drag in profit by quarter. Then they can get into more of the metrics that support those actual KPIs. So they could have, conversion rate on their email campaigns or click-through rate. And they could have, marketing qualified leads. What's the percentage of that becomes sales qualified leads that then becomes closed deals, right? They can reverse engineer that to find out how many leads they need to get from marketing to hit these goals, right? So we give people the flexibility to control that because KPIs are custom per business. But we make it easy to do that because the data is in a format that supports it. So that's kind of
I do find what's interesting on KPIs is that I see a lot of organizations who have KPIs, but what I see companies struggle on is actionable items when they do have those KPIs. It's always a common thing like, oh yeah, I can report on it and I see my KPI and they want to make an adjustment. They don't really know what to do to make those adjustments. It's like, yeah, I get my data points, but functionality wise or business process wise, I think that's where they fall flat in a lot of these KPI stuff. Again, that's from my experience with organizations I've worked with. I'm not sure if you guys have come across that where like, okay, what do we do now? I'm reaching my KPI. Like, what can we do next?
I think you must almost become, professional business analysts in a sense, worth working with individuals about the KPIs. So if somebody was to ask the question, and again, it goes back to what we started talking about at the onset of the podcast and a little bit before, what is a KPI? Or what KPIs do you offer me? So maybe should the question or the thinking that somebody looks at when they're talking about KPIs, it's not what KPIs do you have, it's what flexibility do you have? What flexibility do you have to allow me to, dynamically change my KPIs? Anthony, as you had stated, that they should change, right? So you met your goal for the first KPI. Now, how easily can you set up or, analyze your business from another view with another KPI? Is that probably a more realistic way to look at it versus what KPIs do you have for me?
Yeah, I think that's fair because at the end of the day, KPIs are supported by data. So, my counterpoint's always going to be, well, what data do you have? You know what I mean? What are you capturing? Because you can't monitor this stuff. I remember Brian and I have had this, I think it sort of haunts us, but it's also a funny thing for us. But we had this one customer we worked with years and years ago that was basically trying to tell us that, he's really struggled to get reports around blank, right? And we said, okay, like, that's fine. You can build any type of report you want with this tool. So where's the data live? And he was just like, oh, we're not capturing it. And we're just sitting there like, so you want us to help you get data you don't have into a report format. You know what I mean? Like you have to
Yeah,
capture
but
the data.
I think the question, really typically when you get asked about that, at least me dealing with some of those as a consultant, is that what are you trying to solve? Like what are you trying to do? Like what's your vision? Is really the question, because you're right, because they want these reports, but if they're not capturing that data, it's a struggle to give them something. So it almost comes back to like, really stepping back and saying, what are you really trying to do here? Because some of those changes for them to capture the proper KPI or data points may be a process that they have to make, or adjustments that they have to do so that they can have a good KPI and they can have good dashboards.
Yep. And Brad, this is gonna kill all of us here because I don't want to make Chris's head any bigger than it already is.
Please, no, I've been working on him a lot to try to bring him down, to humble him, to say, Chris, you don't have to tell everybody how great you are, but you don't need to pump him up. All right, go ahead.
But no, in all seriousness, I mean, Chris, that's what makes you a good consultant, right? Because we deal with customers all the time where
I think I'm quitting this podcast after this.
I know, I'm sorry, I told you this is gonna hurt, but the unfortunate reality is they ask for something, they get billed for whatever that something is, and it's not what they wanted. And so now there's the frustration and tension between partner and customer because, well, you asked for this, we built it, but the customer's like, but that's not what I really wanted, right? So it is a lot of times, Chris, about like understanding what are they really asking for. And in fact, I don't know if you've ever seen that famous thing that Disney trained their employees on, but it was the whole, I think it's like, what time is the 5 o'clock parade was the question that gets asked to their employees.
Chris came up with that question, He was consulting with them, and he told them that.
Well,
yeah,
very astute, Chris. But no, in all seriousness, what Disney trained their employees on was that's not what they mean. They're not actually asking you that. They're asking you, where's the best place to be for the parade? Where do I get the best view? How early should I get here? All those things. And so, you get the question, what time's the 5 o'clock parade? Good consultants say, well, tell me a little bit more about what you mean by that, right? And it's like, well, like when should we be here? I know it starts at 5, but like when should we be here, right? So it's that same kind of idea, and I think you're right.
No, that is an important point. I'm sorry, I won't talk. And on the flip side, I also had a conversation with Chris. He told me that he invented the internet the other day as well. I mean, I could tell you some of the conversations we've been having, and I just have to tell him, that I wouldn't even think. I'm funny. Older than him, but I don't think I would have been born if he wasn't able to help somewhere along the lines in this world.
That's too funny.
And
no, I'm just kidding about that. I Mr. Bonaduce over there mumbling under his breath, but I have to give Chris a hard time. It's my job.
Don't blame you. You guys spend a lot of time together on these things, so you got to get it out, air it out. It's healthy.
I'm sure you and Brian have a few of these things that go back and forth too. No?
It is very similar. It's
okay.
Similar and constant with no end in sight.
Well, I think you have to have fun. Anything that you're doing, you have to have fun. If you're working together, in a product such as what you have put together, there's a lot of work involved. Sometimes you spend more time than you do with your families virtually or in reality, that you need to make sure you enjoy yourself a little bit. So.
Yeah, Brian, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say something, just kind of piggybacking a little bit off of what Chris mentioned and what Anthony brought up too. There was a book I read several years ago, and it was talking about kind of getting down to the root cause of why people ask things or why people want to track things or whatever it may be. And one of the important points behind it was, whenever there's a question where someone says, I don't know, like, the goal of our business is to make $40 million next year, whatever it may be, right? To ask 5 whys, right? And it might have actually been 4 whys. But okay, so why do you want to make $40 million? Well, we want to make $40 million so we can grow our R&D operation. Why do you want to grow your R&D operation? Well, because then we're, better suited in the market. Well, why do you want to be? And once you ask a few of those whys, it'll help you get to the bottom of, you might find out underlying they want to make $40 million because 4 levels deep, there's some goal they're trying to get to 4 years from now. right?
Yeah.
So like there's more revenue, so more R&D, so they get a better reputation in the market, so they have more competitive products so that they can do something. But I think a lot of folks, they don't ask, oftentimes don't even ask the first why, right? They
Yeah.
just say, okay, $40 million, make it so, without trying to really dig in and ask some of those more important questions.
That is a good point. I have always found myself asking why, and I would explain to people, I ask why a lot because it will either help you validate, because you eventually get to a point where you validate why you're doing something. It's not that you question why you're doing it, like why are you doing it? That's, ridiculous. Yeah. It's why are you doing it so you can understand why you're doing it. So I think that goes to the point with what Chris had mentioned before is somebody looks at these KPIs, what is the outcome from the KPI? So if someone's setting up, the metrics for their KPIs, should they go through a similar exercise of asking, well, why is this KPI important? Or, what are they going to do with the results of that KPI and how is it going to help them? And could you also have KPIs at all those different levels of the whys?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And oftentimes, that's how things will get structured. I mean, and especially a larger organization, you may have, upper management that sets, hey, these are the KPIs, these are the main goals for the year. And then at the department level, the departments have their KPIs. I mean, the sales department might have a top line goal of, we need to make, X amount in revenue or bring in X many new customers. And then they may have several KPIs there of, how can we make sure that we're spending time focusing on the right efforts to meet these goals that the larger organization is looking to accomplish, for example. So yeah, they can definitely trickle down through the organization. One example I was going to mention too, I know we've talked about kind of KPIs versus metrics. One example that I just thought of a minute ago that I think, a lot of people could relate to is like around call centers, right? I mean, maybe in a call center, there's like the surveys that go out afterwards. Maybe there's the company that runs the call center and they haven't been getting very good marks, right? People haven't been happy with the outcome. And so they might sit down and say, well, how can we fix this? And how can we track whether or not we've fixed it? So you have some metrics like, let's say in a day, how many calls came into the call center? That's a metric. I don't think anybody's probably going to track that at the KPI level, right? It's a little bit too broad. And then, out of those, say, 100 calls that came into the call center, to keep it simple, we have another metric of, well, how many of these people that called in were unhappy, right? So two different things you need to track to put together the KPI. But once you know how many calls came in, once you know how many people were unhappy, you can say, well, we had 100 calls came in, 3 people were unhappy, so we have a, unhappy caller KPI of 3%. Our goal is 5%. So, hey, we're actually doing better than our goal. That's great. Or our goal is 1%. Well, we need to improve processes, improve training. What do we need to do to track this? But that's kind of the difference between an example of the difference between a few different metrics and then how those can correlate into a KPI that gets tracked with a goal set. Does that make sense?
That makes sense to me. Yep. But I would ask why they're unhappy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Yep.
Well, 5 times, in fact. That'll make them really happy. You'll get down to the root of it, right?
Yeah.
Why are you unhappy?
Because the question, what issue wasn't resolved? Why wasn't your issue resolved? Because the person on the phone didn't know what they were talking about. Why didn't they know what they were talking about? Because they weren't trained well. Training.
Yeah.
I'm not happy because my product's broken. Well, why is it broken?
Yeah.
Because you shipped it to me broken. Why did we ship it to you broken?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
My wife and I have been dealing with that, but that's a whole other story.
What's that?
We have time. That's the question. Do we have time for Brian's story?
Oh yeah, no, we can move on.
I don't want to rehash
this.
Can you give me the cliff notes?
Back and forth. Oh, we purchased a table, and first off, the table came. We got the boxes arrived. Super.
Why
excited.
Did you purchase a table?
We purchased the table because we wanted to update the existing table. We wanted to update the existing table because, see, look at that, proactively. But when it came, we, came in several boxes, unpacked everything to get it ready to put together. And I mentioned, I was like, so I see these boxes, and this box says box 1 of 3. This box says 2 of 3. we only got 2 boxes. Is this going to be a problem? And so, and because of supply chain issues and so on and so forth, it had already been backlogged for 2.5 months. Reached out to the vendor. They sent something. They actually said they sent it out, and then we called them back about 4 weeks later, and they forgot to send it out. So they sent out just that 1 box, and then it finally arrived. And we were so excited, and we went to open it up, and it had been damaged in transit or something. I mean, quality control. One edge of the box, all edges of the box had styrofoam, except for one edge of the box, which someone had forgot to put the styrofoam in. It was damaged, and so again, we had to just deal with that. The final box came just a few days ago, and it was even more beat up than the first box, but luckily the merchandise was packed properly, so it's a keeper. But yeah.
So you're happy with your new table?
So I won't mention the retailer, and we won't be purchasing from them again. They got it solved eventually, but at the end of the day, it wasn't worth the hassle. So
No, I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
On another note, to go with the KPIs, will you both be attending Directions in April? You have you doing presentations? Will you have a booth?
Yep, we'll have a booth. Actually, I'm really happy. We got a great presentation slot. I think we're on like the Monday or something around 3:00, so that'll be good. And then we've got great booth placement. So really, really happy with that. So we'll be there again, and that's always such a fun event. Like everyone's excited for Directions, right? That's a fun.
No, I'm looking forward to it. And rumor has it that there's a new track for this conference.
Interesting.
And that I heard that you were running.
Oh boy, what did I get myself into this time? What did I do? Did I say something on one of the other podcasts?
No, actually, we got Kate. Kate was in the call with
I know
us.
exactly which track
I don't
it's
know
in.
if we said it while we were recording or we said it off air, but I heard you're responsible for the bar track.
The bar track, I think that I definitely will have some presentations in that track. That's what I will tell you. So there you go.
Okay.
And it has the highest attendance of all the tracks magically at this next upcoming conference.
Oh, that's fun.
I think it goes back to something we spoke about before, where you were invited to a party, and I think you ended up buying the bottles or something. But,
Oh yeah, that did happen. There was a couple events of that happening, but it's about bringing the community together. Those who want to feel free. Right?
That's exactly why we do this. Chris and I take the time to put the podcast together and appreciate everybody who takes the time to speak with us, because it's all about sharing information and bringing everybody together to help make the Business Central community better than what it already is, and everybody have an appreciation and use of the product, which allows everybody in the community to prosper off of the success of the product as well. So I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. And is there a KPI for for the conference for you? Do you guys have KPIs that you process?
For our, actually, to be honest, we haven't, because Directions, at least in my opinion, right? Like, we don't go there to sell something to try and come home with X number of new partners. I've worked at companies where that was the goal, and it's messy, right? We're there to hang out with people, to literally what you just basically said, Brad, build relationships in the community, keep that thing tight, keep everyone, working together, and just do that, right? Have fun. Every time we go to Directions, have fun, sit down with people we like, meet new people, good things come from it. So we that's actually one conference we don't really measure anything around. We just go there to show up. And you want a KPI? I mean, Directions, I'm sure, is measuring year-over-year attendance, attendee growth, all those types of things that are so critical to them putting on the event. But for us, it's about really truly going down there and just hanging out, networking, seeing people we don't get to see often.
Yeah, I think it's the type of conference that in my opinion, sometimes the value you can't really measure.
Right.
Because you may not, as you had mentioned, you may not walk away with what you call a sale. Mm-hmm. But making a new relationship, so that if somebody's working on an implementation, they know, oh, I was down at Directions. I sat down with Anthony because he thought I was cool. And, now it's a resource to use for somebody who wants to, have better reporting out of their Business Central and other data sources if applicable, using the Cosmos product, which is great.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, and one other thing, Brad, Chris, I know you just mentioned this, Brad, but we appreciate being invited on and the work you guys put in. I mean, it's really cool to see. I know your viewership's going up, and people listening on the podcast is going up, and that's because it's interesting content, right? We listen to a lot of them, and your point, it makes the BC community better, right? There's a few folks putting on, really nice podcasts, and you guys are certainly kind of pioneering with that group. So we appreciate it as well.
No, thank you. I appreciate, and I can't say it enough. I appreciate anybody who participates with us, and I'm even also thankful. You mentioned you're on another podcast. I appreciate other people doing it, because to me, everybody has to be successful. If everybody's successful in the community, I say it over and over again, then we're all successful, right? There's a lot of people in this world. The more use of the Business Central application, the more publicity it has. It's not possible for one person or one small group of people to take, everybody in. But if everybody works together, then, again, I believe in all being successful. So I think that's important. Well, Anthony, Brian, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us. I always look forward to speaking with you. I look forward to speaking with you at Directions. Hopefully we have the opportunity to speak with you there, along with several other participants to get some more information. And once the sign up for the tracks are available for this special bar track, I think I'll have to jump in. I'll be drinking water, but I can do that at a bar. If you would, could you take a moment just to let us know how to get in touch with you, as well as to get a little more information about Cosmos Data, which is a wonderful reporting solution. I use the word reporting generically, but there's a number of features that you have. You talked about with the Power BI dashboards, integration with other systems, cloud-based reporting, so it's easy for someone to use. But where could someone get some more information on the product?
Yeah, so actually appreciate that. There's best place to go, obviously, is going to be the website. And we just launched our new website last week on Thursday. So you probably haven't even had a chance to see that, Brad and Chris. You should check it out. Lots of good content, new videos, up-to-date material, case studies, everything, right? So marketing group has done a great job. And, that's www.cosmosdatatech.com. So that's the place to go, all kinds of stuff. And if you need to get in contact with us, there's obviously the contact us page. You can fill out one of the forms, but lots of good stuff up there now. We're really excited about that new branding, all that fun stuff.
No, I haven't had the opportunity to see it yet, but I will get over there and check that new website and branding out. And we'll also put a reference to the website in the show notes so that everybody can easily get to it from there. And again, thank you for your time again today. Appreciate it. Look forward to talking with you again soon.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony.
Yeah,
Brian.
thanks, guys. It was great chatting with you. Thanks for having us on.
You. All right, ciao.
Take care.
Yep. Ciao. Thank you, Chris, for your time for another episode of In the Dynamics Corner Chair. And thank you to our guests for participating.
Thank you, Brad, for your time. It is a wonderful episode of Dynamics Corner Chair. I would also like to thank our guests for joining us. Thank you for all of our listeners tuning in as well. You can find Brad at developerlife.com. That is DVLPRLIFE.com. And you can interact with them via Twitter, DVLPRLIFE. You can also find me at matalino.io, MATALINO.io. And my Twitter handle is Matalino16. And you can see those links down below in the show notes. Again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, and take care.